Welcome to the Gita in Action podcast. My name's Radha, and I'm here with our full family of seekers today. We have most of the regular crew here today. So this is exciting. So happy to be here with you all. This is the highlight of my week is being here with you all and working through this. And I don't know about you guys, but after the last class, when we talked about the mind, and specifically when we talked about how the mind is like a saboteur and it will tell you to do something and then it'll scold you for doing that. That I thought of that so much. Like when I was reaching for like that chocolate donut, it's like I'm like, you don't need to do this, you don't need to do this, you don't okay, don't eat the whole thing. Don't eat the whole thing. Why'd you eat the whole thing? Why'd you eat the whole thing? It's like, so the next time I actually felt like I kind of got to be the observer a little bit more. And now I'm feeling like I'm getting to control it a little bit more. So that I thought that was a pretty, for me anyway, that one really stuck with me. So we're going to continue going through chapter 6, and we're still learning about the mind. We're going to talk about the mind again today. Man, we're going to have such strong minds after this, all of this knowledge and exercise we're doing with our mind. But today we are going to we're going to go over text 7 and 8 of chapter 6. So text 7 and 8, we're going to go over. And again, these are two powerful teachings on the inner journey of spiritual life. So in 6-7, Krishna is going to introduce the concept of the Supersoul for the first time. Now, we've talked about the Supersoul, God in the heart, many times, but this is the first time that Krishna is going to talk about it in the Gita, which is pretty cool. And he's going to explain that when the mind is conquered, peace follows. And with that peace comes real connection with him. So that's 6-7. And then we're going to talk about 6-8, where we meet this self-realized yogi. So it's someone who's steady within, so steady within that they see pebbles, stones, and gold all with equal vision. So these verses remind us that the spiritual path isn't just about what we know, but it's about how we live, how we see, how we respond. And we're going to talk a lot about how to translate that, how to translate what we know from how we live. So we're going to unpack the differences between the mind and the soul. We're going to talk about how knowledge becomes realization. And once again, this common theme that we've been talking about pretty much since we started the Gita of how true steadiness comes not from escaping the world, but from seeing it through the lens of spiritual truth. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And with that, let's just get started. Let me see where's my share my screen button? Why can't I see? Oh, there it is, right in front of me. Great. Stella, when you're ready, can you read text
Sure.
7 for us? Thank you.
Yes. For one who has conquered the mind, the Supersoul is already reached, for he has attained tranquility. To such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same.
Thank you. So a lot of people, myself included, oftentimes confuse the mind with the soul. And this is an easy thing to do, because they're both internal, they're both subtle, they're not visible to the eye. But it's really important for us here as yogis to understand that they're just fundamentally different. Right? The soul is the source of consciousness. It's the source of consciousness. It's who we truly are, pure, spiritual, eternal, the spark of divinity. Okay, the mind, in contrast, is like a channel or an interface, right, through which the soul's consciousness, the soul's a source of consciousness, connects with the outer world. And wherever the mind goes, that's where our awareness follows. Right? So unlike the soul, the mind is filled with impressions from our past experiences. Right? That's the channel that our consciousness is going through. It's already like filled with all of these impressions that from our past, many of which are shaped by desires that we've had. Right? And over lifetimes, as we've acted out of worldly impulse, the mind has become saturated with those impressions. Right? So if you have soul, the source, it's the source of consciousness, and the consciousness is going through the mind. You can think of it like a tunnel that's like already saturated with impressions. I grew up in Missouri, and we would ride our bikes on the Katy Trail, and we'd go through these caves. The Katy Trail was like an old railroad trail, but we'd go through these not really caves, but these rock formations, and they would just be like covered in black, like smut from the trains, I guess. That's what I'm like picturing as I'm talking about the mind having all these impressions. Like it's just completely covered in this like thick coating of smut already as the consciousness is flowing through it. Right? And because of this, because the mind is already saturated with all these impressions, it becomes critical, restless, even emotionally dramatic. Sometimes so caught up in the story, it's spinning, then it forgets what's even actually happening. Like it's just so dramatic. And even when things are going well, the mind might find something to criticize. And anybody ever do that? It's like I'll be so proud of myself when I get here, and then you get there and you're like criticizing yourself. Right? So when things are tough, the mind makes us feel worse. It amplifies this fear, this doubt, this discouragement. Because the mind is always present. It's always speaking from within. It's not easy to ignore. And this is, again, just the way that the mind is. This is the Gita is just teaching us, what to expect from the mind. I know last night I had a dream that I was late for this podcast. For some reason, I was like out serving tea to people, and 7:30 rolled around, and I was like not anywhere near a computer. And I'll tell you, I was like completely freaking out in my dream. It was like you would have felt like my house was on fire or something. And it's so funny because honestly, that is like my default. Like I have this thing, like I'm a responsible person. Like my ego is tied into this. I'm responsible. And if I'm late for something or if I don't show up like 100%, I am like, I am so hard on myself. It's just, it's who my ego identifies with. It's like who I think I am, right? But when I woke up, I was like, that's so funny because I feel like now it's much less of a deal if I'm late. Like I'm much less stressed about it. I'm very routine and I'm very schedule, so I do everything at the exact same time, so it doesn't usually happen. But if it did, I know it wouldn't be as severe as it was in my dream. Because I've learned to control my mind a little bit more. Not that I'm there yet, because I still would get some anxiety, but I've come to grips with reality, which is that, well, to some extent, I've come to grips that I'm not the controller. That I do my best, and that I have to just be okay with that. I do my best to be responsible. I don't do it to serve my ego. I do it to serve Krishna. And so this is the path that I'm working on, and that I know many of you here are working on too. And this is what it does too. It gradually starts to purify the mind. Because my mind is covered with these impressions this narrative that if I'm not responsible, that I'm a failure. This is the impressions that are covered in my mind. But we know through studying this that we're human, that we try our best for Krishna, and then we have to let go of the rest of it. And that's what I'm trying to practice. And as I see, I can see this kind of grip on my mind kind of loosening a little bit. Just like I said, I can see, I feel less anxious at the idea even of being late, whereas it used to be just like crippling to me. So this is just an example of how this works. And I have a question in here for you guys. Oh, and I see Stacy has her hand up, and maybe she can share too. But my question for you guys is if you've ever noticed your mind telling you something that you knew wasn't true for your deeper self, and what that was like for you guys. So Stacy, if you want to share first, and if anybody wants to share any experience about their mind and how it kind of pulls them away due to its past impressions, that'd be great too.
I just
Stacy,
sorry. Yeah,
yeah.
I started to I'm like a little like I'm started to cry because it's such a struggle. This is like this is honestly, it's so deep. It's like I want to like rip myself off of myself because of the way that my mind does that. Like, but like you, like so I set my alarm. I get up at 4:30. I do my job. Like I am very scheduled when it comes to things. And if I stay scheduled, I'm good. But one morning, I guess the alarm. I was must have been tired, and I looked at my alarm. And if the first thing I did was look at the time, and I said 5 o'clock. And I was like, did I sleep through the alarm? And usually that would wreck my day, maybe even my week, because I slept through it. Like obviously I was sleeping. It wasn't like a conscious decision, I'm gonna do this. And I got up, I took the quickest shout because I have to do all these things so that I can do my deities in the morning, blah, blah, blah. But I got up. I did what I normally would do anyway. I was a little bit late in getting usually I like my rounds done at a certain time. Like this is how it goes, Stacy. Don't you know your mind is saying this is how it goes? And then, but I just went ahead with it anyway, and and it was fine.
Hmm.
But like I literally like it that hits me so deep that I just all of a sudden started crying because my mind does that to me, and it could ruin a day, a week. It could ruin like everything. And,
Right.
and like you said, like I'm starting to learn and maybe even say, you know what, maybe I should get up at 5 instead of 4:30. Maybe that's just really too early for me on a regular basis.
Hmm.
That would never happen before.
Oh, that's
So
so beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, because our soul is loving, our soul is compassionate, our soul is accepting. The mind can be that tyrant, you know. The mind will hold it over you. The mind will tell you you're not good enough. But the soul, that's not the soul. And because the soul's consciousness gets tunneled through, it gets shot through that dirty tunnel of the mind with all these impressions, those things latch onto it. But we have to understand that we are not that, and to be able to observe when those things are happening and come back to this. We're not the controller. We're not the controller. We try our best, but even with that, we have to be detached. We have to be detached. Yeah, Stella.
Um, yeah, it, this really, it's, when as you get older, you learn a little bit more of this, but, besides being the tyrant like that, I found over my life that, I'm a New Yorker, and it was really drilled into me, like, you got to stay alert to your environment. There's danger. What neighborhood do you go into? What do you don't? How do you walk through the street? It's and as I've done my Christian consciousness, I've been really, especially the last 3 years, trying to meditate on what it means to trust Krishna.
Mm,
Like to trust, like I have, he protects me. So what does that mean? And how do you trust that, but move through the world? And the way my mind, I have seen my mind take over is that we'll be in a wonderful place, and my mind immediately goes like, you got to lock the door. You got to look around. Who's here? Like, who are the people? What do they look like? Assess their danger,
yeah,
If I express that, the people I'm with, like, my husband or something, he'll be like, why are you bringing this negative energy into this?
right.
It's like the mind's impressions and conditioning will just, it's like, when you say the water's running through and it gets all the smut in it and it comes out black,
Yeah,
when I really liked being there. And I don't know why I do that. Like,
right. The mind just amplifies. It's like an amplifying machine.
yeah, and then I sit there going, why did I do that? Like, now I can see, but at that moment I couldn't see. And like I wasn't aware that my mind was doing that. Like, ugh. So it's a real process to learn, like, to pause and say, what am I about to speak? Is it negative? Is it unreal? Why aren't I
Right.
just, like, And I think there's a balance of trust and assessing your environment. Of course, you have to do
Yes.
that in the material world, but you don't have to amplify it. And
Yes.
right, yeah. So
So
I thought
good.
of that instance where they were like, We're safe here. What do you mean?"
Yes. Oh, that's so good. That's exactly what it is, you know. The mind goes out of control. It's like insatiable. Oh, thank you. Thanks for
Thank you.
sharing. Mariah.
Yeah, I resonate so much with all of this. My mind is like, I mean, obviously, this is what we're being told. This is how the mind, body, soul machine works, right? So my mind is always like, you have to do this, or, it just wants to pull you everywhere. And one particular instance that I noticed recently, because I just moved like a month ago and I'm still unboxing, like most of it's in place, but there's like one section of like arts and crafts and stuff that I want to organize and put away, and it's still like in boxes on this big table. But anyways, so one day I was like trying to get it all clean, and I'm like, and my daughter was home, and so I'm like cleaning with her, and I'm like getting like really like anxious. And normally I just clean, I organize how I want it, and I was trying to do one area, and I was trying to have her do another area, and then I'm like going in, I'm trying to control how she's doing her room, right? And I'm like, no, do it this way. No, do it this way. And I'm like, man. And she's like giving me these looks, and she's clearly like, Mom, like you're controlling the whole situation, you know? And I was like, man, where does this come from? And I was like getting like stressed to the point where like my attitude was like really going down. And I was getting frustrated, and she was getting frustrated. And it was just like really bad. And, and I was like, you're right, Luna. Like, let's just take a break. And I just like sat and I reflected. And I was like, man, my mind gets so like, it just like, it has to be done this way, it has to be clean, it has to be perfect. And I recognize like, I come from my mother who was very much a perfectionist when it came to cleaning. And so I have that. And so it's a good thing. Like, it's nice that we know how to like organize and give things categories and put them away. But it doesn't have to be to the point where it's stressing me and the whole situation out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I've been really practicing like it's okay that everything isn't clean and put away yet. Like it'll get there. Like you can
Mm.
still, you know, take it easy. You can still go to the park with Luna for the day and like then do a little bit of cleaning this evening. Like normally I'm like, no, I can't do anything else until all of this is clean and put away. And I'm like, so it's the only thing on my mind. So that one is like a big one for me. And
Oh.
going through this course during that where it's like you're not the controller, like I'm like, oh yeah, okay, let's apply this to this area. How can I learn to not let the mess make me feel so stressed to where I can't even relax and like do my job or read or hang out with my daughter, like it was
Yes.
that point. So but I feel like I've been doing well. Like it's okay. All of the all of that stuff isn't put away yet, but you can still function in the house. You're good. So that's a big one for me right now that I'm working on.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's just part of the practice, part of the path. I sometimes even like I'll be chanting japa and my daughter will need something and I'll feel like a glimmer of anger. And when I feel that I'm like, okay, I need to put this down. Like it's like what's even the point of doing what we're doing, if it's if we get that way. Again, we just have to keep coming back. We do our best and we have to just accept, we'd have to just but it's tricky, and even the most sincere spiritual seekers get tripped up on this, get tripped up on mistaking the mind for the soul. And if we assume that every internal feeling is spiritual, we might let the mind just drive our spiritual practice, right? And that can be dangerous because we know here the mind is so conditioned, the mind is so impressionable. And the mind is also fickle. The mind is fickle, and this leads to inconsistency. And this can be another pitfall. This can be another vulnerability if we're only practicing spiritual things when we feel like it. That won't bring transformation either. So we have to have a discipline in our practice. We have to override the mind with what we know is right. We can't always trust the mind because the mind is just a product of its conditioning. And we have to know that. We have to see that like a child. And so many of you here are seeing that. And maybe this is another thing we can work on as we go through our weeks is noticing when the mind just starts to take over and when we need to kind of, take it out of the driver's seat and put it in timeout, kind of override it because it will do this to us. And remember this, the soul, who you actually are, this true spiritual essence is love, is acceptance, is compassion. That's what we actually are. All these other things, this anxiety, that's when we're not acting from the soul. We're acting from the mind. And Krishna explains in the Gita that the soul and the supersoul, God and the heart, are situated side by side. We have the soul and the supersoul side by side. And the soul's looking away. The soul's looking towards the material world. And what causes the soul to turn away is that the mind is full of fantasies and desires for enjoyment. Right? And this agitated, desire-driven mind pulls us away from Supersoul, pulls us away from God in the heart. But there's hope for us, right? There's hope for us because when that inner force subsides, we can turn back. When the mind becomes controlled, we can turn back. We can experience peace. Right? We're no longer falsely excited by fleeting pleasures, and we begin to turn inwards. And that inner turning brings us closer to God. And just like Mariah was saying, this could be desire for outside things, and this can just be desire for control. Right? These things take us away from God. Right? But when we can start to learn to control the mind, first by even identifying it when it's going into this overdrive mode, right? And we can bring it back, we can start to come back to God because that's what we're doing when we control the mind. And we do this through devotional connection. When we start to practice our spiritual practices, maybe in a kirtan, maybe in chanting, maybe in a sangha, you start to feel more grounded, more calm. And this is because we begin to trust that Krishna is ultimately in control, right? He sees us, he guides us, he lifts us up, even when things are really low, as long as we just keep doing our part. And this understanding starts to become this inner anchor. It steadies us when the mind tries to exaggerate the downs, just like the exaggeration. Who was I talking about amplifying with right before Mariah shared? Yeah, Stella, yeah. Yeah, this inner anchor, when the mind wants to exaggerate or spiral into negativity, right? This connection with God, it brings us back. Right? It brings us back when we understand, that I am safe. I'm safe. God's in control. I've done what I can to make sure that I'm in a safe area and I'm protected. But at the end of the day, my life is in God's hands, right? When we really start to realize that, it will keep our mind from amplifying the dangers of a situation, right? Or spiraling into these negative narratives. And over time, this connection with God brings this clarity, this positivity, this strength, right? The mind's misleading voice gets quieter and the soul's true nature begins to shine through. But it's a process, and it starts with us identifying it and noticing what's happening. And in that moment, coming back to what we know is real, both materially and spiritually. So another question for you guys. When your mind, what is your mind? Okay, I guess for me, when my mind is racing or chaotic, I like to chant and it brings me back down. Sometimes if it's really out of control, I'll work out and that'll help me get rid of some of that intense energy. But what my mind really wants to do in that moment is like Netflix binge or eat. Right? Those are like my go-tos when I'm feeling a lot of like craziness in my mind. And lately I've been trying to notice that more and make even just like a small, tiny decision that's like a little bit better than either one of those decisions. Right? So I'm curious, what do you guys do when you're feeling really your mind is kind of out of control? What helps you feel more grounded or peaceful? in those moments. I mean, I think Stella, you said you kind of sat and reflected. Mariah said that too. She kind of just sat and sometimes just kind of stepping away from the situation and just kind of coming to grips with what's actually happening without judgment, right? That's important. Anybody else want to share anything?
I would say
I'll
too,
share. Oh, go ahead.
there's things I do when I'm like healthily recognizing it, and there's things I do unconsciously before I recognize it. And
Mm,
yeah, snacking is something I would like. I'll tend to go. I'll be like, wait, why do I'm not even hungry, and I'm like, huh, am I like feeling something? Like, what's going on here? And I'm like, oh, I'm a little anxious, and I'm like, okay. So then showering has been a huge one for me. Like just as a transition, like I get home from work and I'm just like, I need to go shower so I can transition. So then I can be calm enough to do the other things that are good for me, like my chanting or practicing kirtan or reading. Like after work, that's like an after work ritual that I've started recently. Cause I'll be like, after work, I'll be like, I can't do anything. I can't focus. Like, I'm just like, "Wah." And I'm like, okay, I need to like transition from work mode to like calm. I'm home. I'm settled. I can be relaxed mode. And a shower has been a huge help for that. It just like washes it all away. Or
that's a good one.
walk even. But yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think
Stella, did you say something here on the chat, Stella? Reading. Oh, that's a good one.
And others said music. That's also a
Oh
good one.
yeah. Music, yeah. Or going for a walk, Kelly said. Yeah. Yeah, those
Um,
are all good ones.
so lately
Oh,
I use chanting and pranayama first. But sometimes it just doesn't work. Sometimes your mind is still racing, and Veda Sara has taught me to journal. So I will grab my journal and I will just start free writing all of the thoughts down. No, like no discernment, no nothing. Just start writing it all out. And eventually I can kind of condense those ideas. I can start to notice a pattern. Like if I don't have any sort of filter on my writings, I can start to notice a pattern and kind of put it together. And even if I don't want to do that, sometimes just writing it all down on a piece of paper like gets rid of that for me and I can move on with my day.
yeah, it's like a
That is
detox.
Yeah, and when I started this, the first words I wrote were, I hate journaling. This is so dumb. And because I really was resistant to this, and now I'm literally like leaving events early to come home and journal before bed so that I can get all of that out before I go to sleep. So
Wow.
it's been really impactful.
Wow, that's powerful. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, so it's like good news. This is the mind we all have when we all go through this. And even better news, there's something we can do about it. There's practices. We can start by just making a little bit better decision than what we were going to make to deal with it. What we're used to doing to deal, something that's to kind of soothe that actually doesn't really help us much, like a Netflix binge. So, and these are all beautiful examples. And it's a process, it's a journey. You're not always going to make that higher decision, but we try. Right? We try.
Um,
Yeah.
Rather pretty, sorry. I was going to raise my hand and I just thought, I just wanted to
Please.
quickly say, when I, one of the reasons that I'm in this Krishna conscious space that I'm in, and I haven't, it's been very hard for me to get here, is like when I came back from India this year, I don't turn the TV on. I would sit
Yeah.
like even my son, who is not here now, he's at work, but he's been staying in the summer, and he's like, we said something because it was my husband's birthday yesterday, and he said something about watching TV or something, and I said I don't watch TV. And he's like, you used to watch TV all the time. Like I used to say, it's the background noise. I just keep it in so it's background noise.
Yeah.
I don't turn the TV on ever. Like I won't turn it because I know it'll be like, and I'll be like sucked in, and 3 hours later, I'm like, oh shoot, I wanted to work out. I wanted to do this. I wanted whatever. And
Sure.
instead I got sucked into CNN telling me the same news over and over again. That's just going to make me crazy because, oh my God, I mean, I'm in Canada
Yeah.
now, but still I'm an American. And it's like, So that,
Sure.
like, for me, like, I had to know. Same thing with my phone. Like, I get up in the morning when I go to chant, my phone is, like, over there, turned upside down. I'm not listening. If it vibrates or whatever it is has to wait. I have to do, like, Brittany, you said, journaling is my next thing. Like, that has been
Mm.
suggested to me over and over again, and I am so resistant, and I know it's what I need to be doing. Like, even if I write, I hate journaling, you know what I mean? Like, or whatever. So, you guys also had so many great shares. So, thank you. That helps other people
Yeah.
like myself.
Thank you. Thanks, Stacy. And also, for some people, TV is a higher choice than what they're wanted to grab for. Maybe you want to grab for drugs or alcohol. Okay, sitting in front of the TV might be a little bit better than that. So that's all we're really trying to do. And we're all at different places, and wherever you are, it doesn't matter. Just try. That's all we have to do. God loves all of us the same. It's not just try. And to the degree that we try, God will even reciprocate. You know. So, as the Gita teaches, self-realization requires conquering the mind, which means no longer being fooled into thinking the mind is the soul. Such a powerful line that I want us to remember as we walk away today. And remember and to be able to identify when we're confusing the mind for the soul, when when we're letting the mind run away and we're all in. We're all in, and we're just letting it run away. Right? Remember what the soul is. And remember and start to notice when we're acting from the mind and when we're acting from the soul. To just start to notice what that feels like. Just be an observer so that we can start to better control it and we can better control the mind. Right? And scriptures are a great way to do this. The scriptures help us. They kind of tell us about this inner landscape. They tell us about the boulders over here, the obstacles in the road over here, and what we can do to get around them. And this really helps us. This really helps us to start to kind of reclaim our spiritual identity. You know? And ultimately, as we're doing this, as we're engaging our minds, engaging our intelligence in this sacred wisdom, as we're engaging in practices that purify the mind, and reconnect us to God, as we do that, slowly but surely, this inner clutter will start to clear. That smut on our tunnels will start to clear, and we'll start to transcend the dualities that once threw us off balance. And in this verse, Krishna just describes these dualities on these three levels: the level of the body, when he says heat and cold, the level of the mind, when he says happiness and distress, and the level of the ego, when he says honor and dishonor. Because a spiritually advanced person rises above all these three, and they are steady through these life's ups and downs because they're so strongly identified with what they actually are. Right? And it's not like black and white, but we can start to see that we'll be able to, as we identify more strongly with who we actually are, the grip that some of these dualities have on us will start to loosen. And we won't be so concerned about whether if I do this, if I'm going to get honor or dishonor, because we know who we are, and we're anchored in that connection with God, and therefore that's really what we're focused on. And the rest is just kind of noise, right? Like doing this podcast, less concerned with whether people are going to like it or not like it, and more focused on just its service to God. And whatever comes of that is what it is. These are kind of some examples of how we'll start to see in our own lives these dualities take less hold of us. And in that, we'll become more free. We'll become more connected. We'll become more loving because we're connected to the ultimate source of love. So that's what this verse is telling us to do. And in the next verse, Krishna is going to describe how such a person is situated and what kind of vision they have. Okay, so let's go to the next verse, 8. When you're ready, Stella.
Okay. A person is said to be established in self-realization and is called a yogi or mystic when he is fully satisfied by virtue of acquired knowledge and realization. Such a person is situated in transcendence and is self-controlled. He sees everything, whether it be pebbles, stones, or gold, as the same.
Thank you. So this verse is describing a person who is truly self-realized, right? A yogi who is satisfied by knowledge and realization, who sees pebbles, stones, and gold with equal vision. So at first glance, this can sound a bit extreme, right? Like pebbles and gold, like they clearly have different material value. But again, Krishna's point here isn't about ignoring the practical realities of the world. It's just about not being fooled into thinking that material things will satisfy the soul. That's what this really is. It's like not running away with the mind. You know, they have their place, but even in their place, if their place isn't dovetailed in God's service, it's really not even going to bring happiness to the soul. Right? So someone who's realized in this truth isn't like denying the material value of gold, but they're just not chasing it because they know that the joy of the soul far outweighs anything material. And this is the difference between knowledge and realization. Okay, so it's one thing to say, to know that material things don't satisfy the soul, but it's another thing to actually feel that truth, right? Feel that truth so deeply that you stop chasing after them. And again, it's a spectrum. It's not like one day you're in knowledge, one day you realized it. It's like you start to realize it little by little. Right? And you'll see that because in your life, you won't be spending so much time, so much energy, so much resources chasing them. Right? So we'll talk a little bit about how this happens, how we move over on this spectrum, how this knowledge becomes realized. And it's a gradual journey, just like anything else. First, we hear it. Okay, knowledge enters into the ears. Then we contemplate it. Right? We start to reflect. And it moves into the head. And then we apply it. We begin to live it, and it enters into the heart. Okay, so we'll walk through an example. So say we hear the Gita's teaching that material pleasures lead to misery. And the first time we hear it, it might not register so deeply. Right? Maybe it enters into our ears and we think, that's interesting that those people say that. They're a little bit weird and over the top religious, but okay, right? We don't give it much thought. Right? That's just the hearing stage, right? Where knowledge arrives, but it hasn't really landed yet. And we might be in that stage for a while because maybe we're skeptical or maybe we just don't really care. We just don't really feel like it applies to us. Okay, so that's the hearing stage. And for some people that could be like this much of a phase, it could be, or for some people it could be like most of their lives, right? They just hear it and they're like, okay. Right? But the next stage is this contemplation, right? And this is where we really start to kind of wrestle with the idea. We might think like, wait, really? I thought material pleasures were the goal. Like that's what I've been told my whole life, right? More comfort, more excitement, more success. This equals more happiness. But the Gita's saying the opposite, right? The Gita's saying the opposite. So you start to question, like, is it true that material pleasure leads to suffering? Like, is this what I see in my life? Maybe you start to have some experiences where you start to see it, right? But you start to notice that when you chase it, you never really feel satisfied, right? Or it just leaves you wanting more. Or you start noticing that your so-called pleasures make you more anxious, make you more addicted, make you disappointed. Okay, so this honest internal questioning is this contemplation stage. And this is where our assumptions start to kind of get rewired, right? We're not just taking something on blind faith, but we're testing it. We're working through it. We're starting to kind of notice, be a little bit more observant. Okay, and then the next stage, this most powerful stage, is this application stage. Right? And this is when you really start to apply it. Maybe next time we're tempted to indulge in something we know doesn't end well, like a Netflix binge or eating to escape or getting caught in social media drama. Maybe the next time you want to do that, you pause. You pause and you remember what we heard and what you thought about. And even if just a part of you is convinced, you try something different. Instead of reaching for that donut, you chant instead. You serve instead. You just resist that impulse, And this is application. And even when we take this step, even if it's imperfect, something shifts. We start to feel lighter, clearer. We start tasting the peace and the joy that comes from spiritual connection. And this is when the knowledge that we heard starts to drop into the heart. And when it drops into the heart, it becomes realization. But it's not linear or perfect. We'll apply a little bit, it'll strengthen our understanding. Other times our conviction grows through contemplations and fuels more practice. Like it's dynamic. So it's you might learn, you'll take a step forward, a step back, two steps forward and another step back. But what you'll see is that your convictions are starting to kind of take root deeper into you, deeper inside of your heart. And this is where this knowledge is transforming into realization. And because ultimately the Gita, it's not meant to just be studied, it's meant to be lived, right? And through this cycle of hearing, contemplating, applying, we're not just understanding these truths, we're living them. So does anybody want to share a truth from the Gita or any spiritual teaching that you've heard, but you often still find it hard to fully accept or to live by? Does anybody want to share a truth like that? And if not, I can list a few examples that you may resonate with. One is this idea that the soul's eternal, right? The body's temporary. We might believe that on some level, but when we're criticized or something goes wrong in the body, we still feel so affected. Okay? Or we talked also today about the teaching that God is in control, right? And everything that's happening is for our ultimate good. This can be hard to hold on to when life feels chaotic or painful or we don't get what we want. Mariah, do you have one to share?
Well, that's what I was gonna say. That's the one I with the most, I think, is yeah, like believing that God's your well-wisher. Like everyone goes through pain, it's not like, and even the things I went through in my life they're painful to me. To someone else, they would have gotten through it way differently. But it's just like hard to believe sometimes. Like, okay, Krishna, like this, you are doing this for my benefit, and I'll even see it. Like, I'll have the deeper realization, and like I'll see how this has benefited me. But I can still see how like couldn't have been happened a different way. Like it couldn't,
Yeah.
like was that really how it had to happen? Like yeah, just trusting that Krishna has the ultimate plan and like he is your well-wisher. I mean, the trust is there more, but I can definitely see how that was a really hard one for me to assimilate, and one I still have to practice assimilating all the time. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, and that's what this practice is, it's like the next time this happens to you and you're feeling this, like I really wanted it to go to go this way. Try to recognize that, step back and keep yourself from overly interfering, from overly trying to control and see what happens. And then maybe what you see is that things arrange much better than you could have even imagined, and then that in itself builds a little bit of faith. And so that the next time it's a little bit easier. You don't have to like sit on your hands so much to keep yourself from, overcorrecting or mingling because you have a little bit more trust. And that's exactly what it is. That's a process of application and conviction and how they build on each other like that.
Yeah, or like um for me, it's like getting stuck in over analyzing. Like, I don't necessarily always try to go outwardly and like fix the problem. Like, maybe I do sometimes, but more it's like this internal mental battle of like, well, it could have went this way, could have went this way, like, should have happened this, should have done. And I'm like, stop trying to figure it out. Like, you don't have to figure it out. Like, yeah, it could have went a different way and you could have ended up somewhere completely different. And but this was Krishna's plan, right? Like, and he does have your best interest. You don't have to know it. You don't have to figure it out. You don't have to overanalyze it. Just, just be with it. That's so it's just again bringing it back to what the mind wants to do. The mind wants to overanalyze it, wants to figure it out, know it all, and the mind can't, right?
Yes. So good. Thank you, Mariah.
Thank
So
you.
insightful, always so insightful. Yeah, and this other one, this last example I have here, is we know to act without attachment to results, right? We know this, we know it sounds liberating, but in practice, we'll do something and we'll still crave recognition, right? Or we're still feel disappointed when our efforts don't yield the outcome that we wanted. So it's just the practice is just learning these truths, contemplating them, and then as you're going about in your life, noticing when you're starting to act not in alignment with these truths, right? With these truths, right? When you're starting to crave recognition when you did something. Right? And when that happens, just reinforce this idea, right? No, notice how it feels, notice how binding it is, and then reinforce this idea that this is not going to bring you happiness. Even if you get this recognition, that's not ultimately going to bring you happiness. And just we just have to do it over and over again. And eventually our mind will get worn out. It will get worn out of pushing these false narratives, centered on the ego, and it will relax a little bit. But we have to train it. We have to train it, and that's how we train it. We continuously say, no, 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 this is not right. When it tells us this, no, 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 this is not right. I know that you didn't get enough recognition as a kid, or you felt always slighted, but that's not even a reality. That's not where the ultimate love and connection comes from. So like that, we have to train our untamed mind. So this other really cool point, and I'm kind of running out of time here, but I want to go over this point too because this is pretty cool, is how we live this in the path of bhakti. And this is where seva, where service comes in. We hear, we contemplate. This helps us understand spiritual truths. But in application, bhakti often takes the form of service because service is how we express our devotion, if we have it, and how we awaken devotion if we don't. Right? So when we serve God, we take that knowledge and we turn it into movement towards Him. Right? We reorientate our hearts. It's like saying, I want to come closer, and this boat of service is taking me there. And then when we make that move, Krishna responds just out of his affection and his free will. So in our daily sadhana, we strive to remember him. And sometimes by his grace, that remembrance deepens, right? So it's like on our own efforts, we're just like swimming upstream. And sometimes we're getting tired, right? It's exhausting. We don't want to do it, but we're doing it, right? We're putting in the effort. We're making slow progress. But when Krishna sees that, when God sees that and he's pleased, he'll send like a wave to just come and just carry us further, carry us much further than we could go on our own. And that's how God reveals himself, right? And this is how the heart transforms. So not just through study, but through this mercy and this realization. And this realization is sweet, right? It's so sweet when we begin to taste this Krishna consciousness, right? It stops just becoming philosophy and it becomes life and joy and truth in its most tangible forms, but we need this philosophy at the same time. We need this philosophy to give us the impetus to keep swimming. It tells us if you keep swimming, you're going to get there. If you keep swimming, a wave's going to come and carry you, but you have to keep swimming. And so we need to be firmly convicted in this philosophy so that we continue on, so that we can feel that effect. We can catch that wave, right? So we absolutely need knowledge, but even more importantly, we need to turn that knowledge inwards and upwards. And that's through this devotional practice. We move from knowing God in theory to experiencing him. And in that experience, we find the real satisfaction the soul is longing for. Because without love for God, even the most advanced knowledge can't nourish the heart. Right? Without devotion knowledge, it's just like another heavy stone, right? It might look impressive, but it doesn't really bring life. Okay, so this last point I want to make, and then we'll finish up for the day, is what gets in the way of realization. What gets in the way of our realizations? So we talked about how to move from knowledge to realization, right? We talked about hearing, contemplation, applying in our practical lives and applying in our devotional lives. So we get that reciprocation with God, right? But what gets in the way of this realization sometimes? And there's two things I want to talk about that get in the way of our realization, and that is desires, right? Desires that just pull us away. We think we'll be happy if we spend our whole life working so that we can pile up money and get the nicest things, right? That's going to get in the way of our spiritual life because we're just distracted. We're not spending the time or the consciousness in that connection with God because we're chasing all these other temporary pleasures that we think will make us happy. Okay, so that, and then the other one, and this is a big one, doubts. Doubts. This comes from the intelligence, and it makes us question these spiritual truths. And desires are tricky, but doubts can be even more dangerous because doubts, they don't just make us feel bad, they make us feel smart. Right? They make us feel smart. And when we start thinking we already know better, we stop asking for help. We put that wall up between us and God and anybody else that can help us. We get stuck. And so in this way, these doubts can be really dangerous because we're walking around feeling superior. Like, what are those people doing? They are weird. I remember I thought that the first time I saw people with a bead bag, I was like, that is the weirdest thing. I'm not interested. And then 2 weeks later, I'm like getting a bead bag. But this is what these doubts do. They create this wall and they can be dangerous. And this is why Krishna says a lot in the Gita, offer your mind and the intelligence to me, because that's our subtle body, right? And wherever our subtle body goes, the soul follows. So if we want this realization, we have to offer both our emotions and our reasoning to Krishna. And we have to work through these doubts, through study, through patience, through humility. Sometimes even suspending certain questions until we're ready for the answer. We talked about that in a past session. Something we don't quite understand, just kind of putting it on a shelf. Okay, I don't need to understand that to understand this. And then just working kind of through your faith process like that. And at some point that will come in front of you again. And at that time, maybe you evaluate it. And at that time, maybe you keep it on the shelf, but it's natural to have doubts as we go through our practice, but we can't let them like pull us down, take us off the route, right? Take us off course. Okay. So a good way to deal with our doubts, like we talked about, is by studying regular scriptures, coming here, doing just what you're doing. And it's not just to gain more information, but it's to remind ourselves over and over and over where true happiness actually comes from. Because we know that our minds will be persuasive, right? They'll keep pitching that same idea, that the thing that will make you happy, just one more scroll, just one more bite, one more compliment. Okay, as you go through this week, recognize when your mind's telling you that. Because probably today you'll walk out of here and your mind will tell you one of these things, right? One more scroll, one more bite, one more compliment. Right? But when we regularly soak in spiritual wisdom, it strengthens our conviction that those proposals are misleading. Remember that. Know that when your mind tells you that, it's just your childlike mind is confused. Right? But you know better because you've come here, you've immersed yourself in this knowledge with like-minded people, and you're qualified. Right? You get it. You remember that this real fulfillment, it doesn't come from chasing what's out there, but it comes from this purification, this inner remembrance of God and service to Him. Okay, so over time, this steady study and reflection gives us the power to stop reacting to the mind. Right? We can ignore its drama, and then gradually, because it's just like that, it's just like a child, they kept constantly told no, 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 no. Eventually, it'll stop asking. The mind will be silent. Right? And our ability to stay centered will increase, right? Will grow because we've realized that joy of spiritual connection is much more substantial than anything that the material world can offer, right? So this is why this study is important. But at the same time, we can't get caught up in gathering knowledge, reading books, memorizing verses, learning all the concepts, that we forget what it's really for. It's not just to know things. Like, who cares if you know things, if you're not actually applying them in your life, if it's not making you more connected, more steady, more grounded, more loving, more compassionate? Who cares? Right? Who cares what you know? It's the point is to connect to God, to our soul, to real voice, to real devotion. And the knowledge, it's just meant to support that connection. That's why we're here. That's why we study these things, right? It's not to replace it. And if we make the knowledge the goal, we might end up more in our heads than our hearts, right? We'll be more proud of what we know, but we'll still feel a little bit empty inside. Or because we're wired to seek happiness, if we're not getting that joy from our spiritual life, we're going to look for it elsewhere. So it's not even sustainable, right? Just to study without really applying it. If it's not transforming your heart, it's not going to be a sustainable path for you. And that's just because that's the way that we're wired. We're seeking that connection. We're pleasure-seeking creatures. And if we're not feeling it here through this connection with Source, then we're going to go look for it somewhere else. So this is why it's so important that we take this knowledge and we internalize it so that we're experiencing the joy and the bliss that comes from it. Okay. So that's these two verses today, verses 7 and 8. In this next verse, Krishna is going to talk. So in this verse, Krishna spoke about seeing objects equally, pebbles, stones, gold. Now he's going to take it a step further and talk about seeing people equally. And that's even harder. That's what we're going to talk about in the next class. It's one thing to be detached from things, but to look at all people, regardless of their status, their behavior, their background, and see them as equal, as spiritual beings, as part of God. That really takes deep realization. That takes deep realization. And that's what we're going to talk about in the next verse. So just kind of to sum up today, as we reflect on these verses, on conquering the mind, on realizing God in the heart, right, on transforming knowledge into realization, it becomes clear that the spiritual path is not about escaping the world, but about seeing it differently. And it's about learning to quiet the mind so that we can actually hear the soul and ultimately hear Krishna speaking from within. And the more that we live what we learn, the more that God becomes real to us, right? Not just a concept, but a living presence. And we talked about how this process unfolds through hearing, contemplating, applying, right? And how in bhakti, that application becomes service, this heart-centered action that reorientates us towards God. But the journey doesn't stop at seeing things differently, right? The real test of realization is how we see people, right? Can we look beyond the external and see the soul? Can we respond not from ego, but from spirit? And that's where Krishna is going to take us next. So as we close on today, let's kind of try to maybe let's think of something from today that you can take back with you and practice in your week, right? Something not just to purify your mind, but to open your heart. Maybe it's some kind of service. Maybe it's something you've been struggling with that's been pulling you away, that you want to try to be a little bit more intentional and observational about, and instead substitute something else that will bring you up, that will pull you up, right? So something that will stick with you, because that's how this knowledge becomes wisdom, right? And the wisdom becomes love. And this love, this real love for God and for all living beings, that's the deepest realization. And that's why we're all here, right? So that's all I had for you guys today. Before we end for the day, does anybody want to share anything? I really loved all of your shares and input. Thank you all for participating and making this such a connective time for us all. Stella.
Yeah, when you were saying how if you just get the knowledge and just like collect knowledge, it just suddenly like occurred to me like that whole path of jnani, where you could go wrong in that is to just gather all the knowledge in your own head. And I could see where it could lead to impersonalism because you're not thinking about anyone else except your own gathering of that knowledge. And then you could become proud of all that knowledge. And then you could start to think that you're the supreme knower of knowledge. And then it could really go wrong. I mean, it could go right too and lead to the super soul, but I could see where like without the application, just the knowledge can really lead you astray. I don't know.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly what happens. Right? At best they become proud. At worst, they're going to get bored and fall back down because
Right.
it's like, what are they connecting
So
to?
what? So what? What? Yeah, like what you
Yeah,
said. Like, so what? You know what you know. Like, yeah.
right. Exactly.
That was great. Thank you. I really like. Whoa! I never
That's
thought of
a
it that way.
Yeah, quite a realization. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing. Does anybody else want to share? Does anybody want to share anything that they're going to try to take away from this time together today and move into their lives?
Earlier in the class, he said something of like recognizing when it's the mind or when it's the soul. And so I wrote down, my mind, recognizing when it's my mind, the mind is always wanting to analyze and figure out and fix, and letting that go and bringing my soul and my heart into it of like, okay, how can I meet this with compassion instead of analyzing, fixing, right? How can I just hold the space and meet this with compassion or meet this with my heart, meet this with love? So that's what I'm going to keep practicing.
So perfect. That's so nice. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this.
Anybody? Thank you. Thank you guys for showing up and doing the work. You inspire me. I think about you guys. I just thought about you yesterday when I opened up my cupboard and I was looking at my chocolate shelf. It's like, oh, do I want to do this? Do I really want to do this? So it's so important, this Sangha. Brittany, do you want to share anything with us?
No, I'm sorry. I wish I did. I'm just super happy to be here. Thank you. My
Thank
mind is already trying to figure out what's going on with the rest of my day and check it out. So we're gonna just take a deep breath and stay present for this last minute. I'm noticing, when my mind is doing that and when my mind is playing tricks on me and remembering that it's more than that I'm something so much more than that.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you all for coming and for doing the work. And it's been such a wonderful journey with you all. And I'll see you on Thursday to continue. So thank you all.
Haribo.